Welcome to Entrepreneur S.O.S, where we help business owners navigate the often complex world of entrepreneurship. And each week we share expert advice or real-life experiences from successful entrepreneurs who have faced and overcome the challenges of building a business. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, this is the podcast designed for you. So join us each week and let's grow your business together. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, as it helps us to reach more entrepreneurs like you. And today we have Christy Yates as our guest. I'm super excited to have you, Christy. Christy is a licensed, and this is a mouthful, a licensed educational psychologist, retired school psychologist, an author, speaker, and consultant. Her book, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation, recounts her journey as a working mother of two who also managed the care of her parents. And today she's going to give us some tips for balancing your business schedule and home life, which I know is a juggle for many. So welcome, Christy. It's great to have you here today.
It is great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited.
So I see your book behind you.
Yeah,
it's really, really great. We'll link all the information if you want to get a hold of Christy or reach out to her in the show notes.
Thank you so much for being here. This is a great topic.
Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah.
And I love the sandwich generation, right? Because the parents and the kids, but even for those that don't have that, but just right, quote unquote, have the busy schedule. What are some tips that you have for people to really balance that without all the chaos around?
First, I'd say this whole thing about sandwich generation, it's if you're in it, you know it. If you're not in it, it might be on the horizon. But a lot of us who have started to work from home, especially for parents, and we wanted to have more time to work from home and start a business and do all these things, might suddenly find, even if we don't have children in our home, we might find there's somebody we have to care for. And that's that balance act that comes into play then. Like, how do you do all this? How do you get out there, hustle, do all these things? And suddenly your time is taken up with different kinds of activities you weren't anticipating, doctor's appointments or legal appointments, or just having to care for someone in some way. And I think that this can really stress us out. It becomes all of our life trying to figure it all out. And most of us who are trying to build our own business, we're go-getters, and we get out there and we do a lot of stuff, and we do a lot on our own, right? Because that's what you have to do, is certainly getting it off the ground. And this challenge of then having other people that you have to do something for or with means we have to start teaming up. So I think my biggest tip for people is learn how to accept help from others. This is a really hard one. And learn how to ask for it, learn how to accept it. You've got to build your team. So if you're just, and I hate using that word just, right? Let me just erase that, because there's no just this. Look, even if you're a single person, your children are adults and they're out of the home, that's a lot of work, right? But building teams is really important. So I'd say start local. Like, what do you live in, a neighborhood or a community where you can get to know people? We've been stuck in our houses, right? And we haven't necessarily connected. I think connecting is really important because, and I always joke with people in my neighborhood, I'm like, look, when the zombie apocalypse happens, I want to know who runs fast and who runs slow. And we joke about it. We have found times where we needed to help one another out. And if you don't take that time to get out of your bubble and meet those people, then when you might need help, you are empty-handed. I don't know if you guys find that happening in your lives, but that's something that I think has been really put on the shelf because of how our world has been in the last 3 years. So I think that getting outside of your box and connecting with people is really important. And learning how to ask for help is really important. I did a video that's on my YouTube channel, and I did this within a group that I'm an affiliate for. And it's really about how to ask for help. We've learned to do everything for ourselves. And I think learning how to ask for help is also a skill that we can build. So that's probably my first area that I think is really important, is building that team. And doing that, you have to learn to ask for help.
I love the asking for help piece, and I love the connecting piece, which is so true. We have gotten away from it. And I'm an introvert. Like there are literally weeks that I kid you not, that I do not leave the house except maybe to run to get some groceries. I am such an introvert.
Mhm.
I actually had a movie ticket to go see a movie and I forgot that I had the ticket and I was going on my own. Monique and I talk about this. It is a great reminder, especially if we need help, because if we don't really connect, then we're not so
Right.
great. So that's great.
I think back to how, as people, as humans, we really started, and we started as tribes. We started in communities and tribes where we sought help from everyone else in our tribe or our community. And even as eras provided, you still had your neighborhood, and there were the neighborhood whatever. And there was always a group of people that was in your community. I think that's why people join churches, for community. There's a lot of ways that people foster community.
Right.
But like you said, in the last 3 years, I feel like all the changes with COVID and just having to stay in your home and then getting comfortable like that, it
Right.
has led us to be a little resistant to getting out there and even meeting the new neighbors. Honestly, like I have 2 neighbors that are leaving our neighborhood, and we were all like, who's going to move in? Because we had built this little community of like our 4 houses or 5 houses that we all did stuff for each other. I'll water your plants, or I'm going to be gone. Can you get my mail? And then 2 new people entering. We're like, oh God, we hope this is good.
Yeah.
I do think there is a lot to be said about finding that local group that you can connect with, whether it be neighborhood or church or networking, women, friends. I think that's a really important tip that we've forgotten about.
And one of the things, and you know what, Sandy, I can totally identify with the introvert thing. I am not an introvert, but I have become one over the last 3 years and gotten comfortable. It's really weird. But and when I say connect with people, I'm not saying go out and make best friends and have to hang out all the time. But you don't gotta. The choice is when you do go out and introduce yourself to the people that live around you, just to say, listen, let's look out for one another.
Yeah.
Things happen, right? We had a weird incident where someone came, and we have a little walkway up to our home, and we have some in-ground lights, and somebody was just pulling in-ground lights up, and we got it on our video. But other people called and said, somebody's doing something funny, and people were looking out. People were looking out, and that is nice. And think about, now I live here in California. There are all kinds of things where you might live pretty remotely, but you get to know where are people along that route. If your home is on fire, where are you going to go and where are those services? But you have to figure out those kinds of things. So again, I'm not saying go out and make a bunch of best friends, but I think learning how to connect again and introducing and even setting the ground rules. I'm just connecting because I want to be there to help you, or you can help me, or whatever. These are the things we can do. In my video talking about asking for help, one of the things is what gets in your way from asking for help. And sometimes it's old tapes, right? And I think of it as a playlist in our head, right? I'm so old, I think about the old album, but really it's your playlist,
in
right?
The cassette tape.
It's the cassette. It's the
Sony Walkman.
B-side of that
Sony
album
Walkman.
or whatever, right? But these days it's like, it's the playlist, right? And so you've got this playlist, and one of the songs might be, it's better to give than receive. That's a big one, right? Everybody feels that way. You're selfish if you ask for help, or you're not good enough if you ask for help. Or my personal favorite is, I have to do everything by myself, or I have to do everything for myself. That's a list. That's a tape on my playlist. And I have had to learn to slide in some new songs, which are, hey, Christy, you enjoy helping other people. Chances are other people are going to enjoy helping you. So when I can shift that mindset to thinking about how it feels to me when somebody asks me for my help, I'm like, wow, yeah, I'd be happy to help you. Then we can get more comfortable with doing that. And then it's just a matter of how do you ask for help? And one of the things that's really important is to be very clear about what you want right off the bat. And a lot of times what we want to do is we want to give a whole big story, a whole bunch of justification for why we need your help. And really, the only thing you need to tell them is, here's what I need. Here's when I need it. Can you do it? Yeah. And then you can give them some justification, but give somebody the opportunity to be able to say yes or no. And then when you get a rejection, you have to ask again to somebody else, because the rejection is usually circumstance and not about you. And we want to make it about us. We're like, I can't ask anybody else. This person said no. It's like, you asked them to pick you up at the airport, but they're going to be out of town. That's not a rejection of you. That's a circumstance. So we have to wade through all of this, but it's a skill and we can learn and practice it. I think one of the things I try to do in my work when I'm talking to parents and groups about this squeeze in the sandwich generation is, how does this impact our children? So I'm constantly thinking about kids. I think that even being a business owner and building a new business, that's a great role modeling for young folks, right? For our kids. And they see that, and even that time we spend away from them to get this business off the ground can be really wonderful for them to see. But we have to make some time to talk to them about why we're doing it and what we're doing and what are the skills we're having to learn, because then we're role modeling for them those things that they might have to do later in life. And so having that conversation with them is really important. Asking for help and building your team, that's a starting point. But secondly, looking at how is this helping grow the next generation. All these things we're doing is really helping to role model for the next generation. And we forget that sometimes. We think, we just have to keep them safe from all of these things. But really, you can talk about that and think about, how is it for you? What's going on? What do you need from me? What would be different? How's this happening? And maybe there's negotiation you have to do. Mom, I really want you to show up for this one thing. Wow, okay, that's usually in the middle of my day, but you know what? I get it. You need me there for that one. I'm going to shuffle. And then you make those changes, and that supports our kids in feeling heard and feeling seen. But also, you're talking about why you have to be away sometimes, why you have to be saying no sometimes. And we do have to say to our kids sometimes, I can't do that, but here's what I can do, that kind of thing. So I think that's a really important piece. And being age appropriate, this is where for years I've been working with kids, and how I talk to a kindergartner is going to be way different from how I talk to a teenager. So we have to think about what they can handle. And a lot of times in my work, we're talking about an older person who's ill or ailing, or the reality in life is we're all going to die, and we have to be able to talk about that, but we don't. We shy away from it, and it's a normal, natural process. And I think learning how to have those difficult conversations in families is also important. And that happens as you're growing a business too, because life doesn't stop because you're building a business. So those kinds of things interfere.
When you speak to the sandwich generation, you're speaking mostly to the Gen Xers, I'm assuming, because that's right now, that would be whose parents are aging. But do you think that this is really a generational boundaries issue? You look at a lot of these spoofs on Gen Z, I think it is, and then millennials, and then there's Gen X, and then there's baby boomers, and how they react to different things. Do you feel like generationally, women are evolving to be more likely to set those boundaries for themselves and say, hey, it's okay for me to say no to this, or that whole I have to take it on myself thing?
Yeah, I definitely see differences in generations, right? It's a really interesting time right now. So some of the interesting things that are happening are people are living longer, and women are, or those who have children, are waiting longer to do that. And so they may not be 20 or 25. They might be 30 or 35 or 40 or 45. So there's all kinds of interesting dynamics. I do think that women have been traditionally trained to do it all and without complaint, right? And we train them that way in society, happens in schools sometimes. I think we're getting further and further from that, but it is a slow slog. But I do see younger women sometimes being able to set those boundaries a little bit better. I will say, though, that it's not easy for them because they don't necessarily get the support to do that. And sometimes they don't get support from people my age or even a little older. So that sometimes is a problem. And we have to look at the changes not being bad, but it's an inevitable change. Women are not just in home working, then having children, and then going back to work. I worked the entire time, right? So I had my kids later in life, and I worked full-time the entire time I had kids, still working full-time. So lots of changes have happened, but I definitely think that there's some differences in the generations and how they respond to things. And that's a challenge for me in reaching out to people. How can I support people who maybe see things a little bit differently? But when it comes down to it, it's really about families and really about men and women, and all people want healthy, happy families at the heart of it. They may go about it differently, and there's not one right answer for anything. There's lots of different answers to most questions. So we have to figure out what that is for each of us.
So going back to juggling, quote unquote, a business, a schedule as an entrepreneur and home life, kids, of course. And you're right. I remember when my kids were little, they're adult now, but when they were little, I did actually have those conversations with them because I was working full time.
Yeah.
And now I was in the horse industry and I was training horses. So part of it, they could come to the barn and hang out and do so. That was a good compromise. But as they got older, of course, they understood more, and that was good. Is there anything else that you would suggest as far as self-care of an entrepreneur? Because as an entrepreneur building a business and then kids, it's either kids or it's adult parents. You understand so much. Like, how does one just themselves?
Part of my answer would be going back to the teams and things like that, finding communities that can support you. So if your kids are in school, unless you're homeschooling your kids, and if you're homeschooling your kids, I'd really advise, and this is coming from me as an educator, I'd advise getting into groups with people who are homeschooling, right? Because your kids also need some socialization, right? I envision groups of kids going around to different people doing different things and activities, and that works really well, right? I think that's important. Again, that goes back to that team atmosphere where you're finding groups that can support you. I think the most important thing in self-care, Sandy, is realizing you deserve it, realizing that you're worth it. I think that you have to start with, do I believe I am worthy and deserving of self-care? Do I believe that this is good for me and it's good for my family and it's good for my business? And I would say the answer is yes to all of those when we really can start to see if we don't take care of ourselves, the business is not going to grow as strongly and as solidly as it could. If we don't take care of ourselves, our kids aren't being taken care of. And we may be feeding them, getting them to school, doing all the things, but how are we showing up to be with them? If we're a mess inside, it's hard to connect. It's hard to really be genuine and authentic with our children in a place that's joyful and helpful for them. And I think this shows up a lot in sandwich generation, a lot, because we're also then handling this dynamic of what's called anticipatory grief, right? If we're in any way managing the care of someone who's ailing or aging, we might be already thinking about the end of their life. And that fills us with grief even before the person is gone, right? We're already thinking about those things somewhere. There's like a low hum of anxiety and grief. Oh my gosh, will I be able to handle this? Oh my gosh, what do I do? And if we're not addressing that and acknowledging that when we are then talking with our kids, that stuff shows up and our kids feel that energy. I'm really attuned to energies. And I feel like when kids feel that energy, then they're less likely to tell us what's going on because they don't want to upset us. They feel that we're not there. They feel that we're not at our best. And sometimes they're confused. They might think that's about them. Mom's upset. What did I do wrong? That might be their first thought, especially a young child. So we have to really be clear with ourselves. Are we worthy and deserving of self-care? Are we clear that when we're taking care of ourselves, we're actually taking care of our kids? The other piece to that is our kids see us doing this. And that's where I say you be very intentional about conversations around that too. It's something like metacognition. Metacognition is when we are thinking about our thinking. So when we explain to our kids, here's why mommy is doing this. I know I'm going to miss your soccer game today, but I need this day because I'm really worn out by a number of things. And I want to be there for you for a long time, but I need a break. Do you ever feel tired? I know you do. You take a nap. I need to take a nap today too, or I need to take a day away too. And your child will understand that when you can have that for them. And then they're going to see you show up better. They're going to see you show up as being really fully present. So I think it's number one in self-care. I think it's really asking yourself, do I feel I'm worth it? And if you don't feel you're worth it, you got to work through some of those blocks. And you can do that with EFT. I know you guys are familiar with that now. I love emotional freedom technique. I love meditation, journaling. If you need to talk with somebody, but work through those blocks to thinking you're not worth taking care of yourself. And then those steps that will help you will become more apparent, right? It might be you take a day away every week or something, or once a month you get away, or you're setting boundaries where you're, you know what? I'm not going to be the Girl Scout leader and the soccer parent and the basketball parent and the team parent on the swim team this summer. I'm going to limit it to one. You figure out what you're going to do. And those are the things you can do. And on top of all that, have your bubble bath, have your glass of wine, whatever. Those are all good too. I'm not against those kinds of things. I happen to love massage. So I'm at a place in my life where I can afford to go out and get a massage once a month. And I wish I could do it every week, but honestly, I don't have the time for once a week. Making time for those things is really good for me. So that's what I'd say a little bit about self-care. I'm not so sure there's a magic formula like you must do blah, 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 blah. I think a little mental time, emotional time, and then physical time. So I'll always recommend some sort of exercise. Get outside.
That's
our
my
bodies
go-to
need,
for
yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
our bodies need, and in my book, I list a number of things, and I definitely talk about these other things. Our bodies need vitamin D, and it's better if we get it from the sun. Honestly, we can get it from a tablet, but it's great when we can get it from the sun. And then being outside. Now, I'm finding I've got a lot of seasonal allergies right now, so I have to work through that. But I love being outside and getting out in nature and finding time to do that.
I love what you said about deserving, because I think that's really where it starts. Because again, it goes back to the fact that women are expected, quote unquote, to do it all. That's a great place to start. I never looked at it that way.
And also, we may have inadvertently taught we teach people how to treat us, by the way. But we can also change that. We can also teach people to treat us a different way, right? So we teach our kids how to treat us too. If we've always been a responder, and never letting them down, never saying no, then we've taught them that's what to expect from us. And I don't know that's always a great thing. I believe that it's okay to say to a child, or even to a spouse or partner or business partner or lover, it's okay to have those boundaries. No, I can't do that, because that's the real world. And you're also showing them that they can set boundaries. I don't want my kids to be yes people all the time and always say, I'll do everything for everybody else. I want them to be able to say, nope, that's not for me. I'm going to do something else. So I need to do that too when that comes up for me authentically.
I think that brings up an interesting conversation around how a lot of women, they build their self-esteem on doing everything for everyone else, and versus looking at it through a lens where they're not really taking care of themselves. And when they're not doing, they have this massive guilt around they should be doing something. And I don't have kids. So for me, my boundaries are always set around people I work with, or the teams that I work with, or my husband or friends. You have to set those same boundaries. When you say you teach people how to treat you, it's true. You teach your friends how to treat you, teach your coworkers how to treat you, you teach your spouse how to treat you. And so you have to take a step back and ask yourself, what is it that I'm doing on a daily basis? Well, because I know so many women that are listening right now are feeling like they're pulled a million different directions. And so it's coming back to, how are you teaching all of these people to teach you, your children, your spouses, your friends? What are the actions that you're responsible for? It's hard to take a look at, especially if you're that kind of person. I love to give and help people. So it makes you feel good. And so a lot of people, we get addicted to that feeling, oh, I'll help them. It'll be okay. I can figure that out. And then it snowballs into this, I'm overwhelmed and I'm going to pull my hair out. And we're not taking responsibility for our part in it, which I think is an interesting conversation when it comes to all of this.
That's a really good point. The looking at what's my responsibility in this, right? Because sometimes when we get overwhelmed, then we want to look for who did this to us rather than, oh, dang it, it's me.
Exactly. I said yes. That was me.
But some And I got to say, I'm one of those people. I have a lot of capacity. I can do a lot. I can take on a lot and not. Some people can't take on a lot. Some people, you have to know what your capacity is. I can, but I also know some of it costs me. And I have learned that over time. So
just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. And in fact, it's really productive for me to practice slowing down sometimes.
I hear you on that. Sandy and I both like, we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do all of it. And then the next thing you know, we're so tapped out because we haven't practiced the ability to say, wait a minute, I need to go for a walk. And I think it comes down to your personality. If you are a doer by nature, you just keep doing, and the people that don't do will give it to you to do. And then all of a sudden you're doing it.
And life just keeps happening. So we keep putting things on our plate, and then life comes along and says, bam, here's this. And then everything else is falling off. So for those people who are addicted to doing, and I would be one of them, it's learning how to slow down and feel okay about slowing down. I'll share with you something that's new for me is I've always done some sort of stretching, physical stretching and some yoga on a video or something like that. But I've recently, beginning of this year in January, I found a yoga studio that I really like, and I started going to it. I go to just gentle yoga. I'm not a power through core yoga person, but I also go to a class called Restore Yoga, and it is all about teaching your body how to relax. It's not a stretch and hold pose. You're holding poses that are relaxing poses. It has been so great for me as a chronic doer to learn how to slow down. I go to sleep better. I can stop and relax a lot faster now. And just learning to train my body to tap into what's a natural thing my body can do has been really wonderful. This kind of all goes to the whole self-care thing. For me, that's been yoga. It might be something else for someone. It might be going out and getting a bike ride in, or a really great walk, or whatever kind of exercise that really works for you. Getting in a pool, swimming. I love swimming. I don't always get out to a pool, but something like that is really a great way to take care of yourself. But paying attention to these things, being aware. So I started out by saying, do you think you're worthy and deserving? The second thing I'd say is to being aware of, how do you operate? Are you one of these chronic, what are you addicted to in terms of, is it substance or is it doing? And then realizing that constant even if we're really able to do it, it's building up a lot of stress in our body. It's building up all that, because our bodies have to keep going and push through. And so that stress cycle is going all the time, and we need to stop it sometimes, because that cortisol, we need to find ways to release that cortisol, to complete that stress cycle, slow it down, get our heart rate down. What I become aware of when I'm really in my best self is, are my earlobes touching my shoulders? Because that's when I know I am stressed, because it's like, that's where I hold it. That's where I hold it. Yeah. It might be your jaw. Like a lot of people hold it in their jaw. Are you clenching? Where are you clenching? Because somewhere, and if you can just be aware of what's happening in your body, you can be more attuned to, what do I need to slow down, and why do I need to slow down a little bit? And then for some people, that'll take a lot of time. And for some people, you can do that pretty quickly, but figuring out what's going on. And so definitely, I feel like being aware of, do you feel you're worthy and deserving? And then the other one is paying attention to your body. Are you aware of what shows up for you when you're stressed out?
My mother already said to me, do you have ants in your pants? Because I was a mile a minute as a kid already.
Yeah.
And it's become a habit. If I wasn't doing, I felt guilty. It's like, and I have interrupted that. And I actually went as far as time blocking when I get up and walk away or whatever.
That's great.
And of course, for me, it's great that the dogs, but it's definitely one of those patterns, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy by any stretch of the imagination. I really personally believe it can affect your physical health, but especially also your mental. It just builds up. When I was going through something many years ago, my kids said to me, Mom, if you don't take care of yourself first, you're not going to be good for us. Now, granted, they were older to recognize that, but still. And that was a wake-up call for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the awareness piece, because in the doing of self-care, of course,
Mhm.
like you said, there's so much out there, but recognizing all that is so important.
And not everybody is a writer. I happen to love to do journaling, and that helps me. If in the morning I can write a few things, and in the evening I can write a few things, that got me through some of the toughest times. My story is that I was working full time as a school psychologist. I have 2 kids, my husband, and then both my parents had dementia of one kind or the other. My dad had vascular dementia, my mother had Alzheimer's. I'm here in California. They lived 5 minutes away. My sister's in Montana. My brother's in Michigan. Who do you think got in charge of everything? It was Christy, who had all these other things going on. But journaling was something that helped me to slow my brain down at night. And I got in the habit of just writing down all the things I needed to let go. I tied that into some spirituality, and I would just write a letter to God, and I'd say, okay, God, here are the people I need for you to take care of today because I can't handle them anymore. And here are the situations I need you to take care of because I can't handle them anymore. And I just said, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go. And that helped me to be able to get some sleep. So it's really important to think about what works for you. Other people, writing is the last thing they want to do. Explore what it is for you. It might be taking a moment to do some stretching on the floor before you get into bed. That's really great. It might be that you read something that's really inspirational or calming. It might be talking to someone. One of the things we did get out of the pandemic is a lot more connection via Zoom, which isn't great all the time. I love being in person, but you can find groups, you can find people online, and you can connect. So there are different ways to, you can call it network, you can call it support groups, but you can find them. My caveat to all of that is find ones that help you feel better when you get off the time rather than anything that's going to stress you out more. Maybe you don't get into a group that's trying to raise your level of anger and upset, but maybe it's one that's going to say, here are things you can do to feel better. So that would be my one caveat.
I watched my brother actually take care of my mom. Today's actually my mom's birthday. She would have been
happy
83.
Okay.
She died a couple years ago, and I watched my brother be the primary caretaker because he was closest. And I think also a point that when we're in situations like that that we don't think of, if you're a family member or a friend, reach out to those people, because I saw my brother take on everything. That was his personality too. He's a doer. He wanted to, he felt obligated, I think, as a child to a parent he loved. But I pushed the issue and said, I think you're getting burned out, because there is caretaker burnout. And you need to ask for help. Like, we're here to help. On the flip side, if you have people in your life like you that you see, don't be shy to interject and say, hey, I see you struggling.
Yeah.
How can I help you? How can I support you? And be the person on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, if you're not personally going through it. Because I couldn't be there for my mom, but I could see where he was at. And so I had a family meeting and said, hey, we got to do something about this, because I feel you don't have a life right now, and that's not okay. It's not your job.
That's so wonderful that you did that. I want to just say, for all the caregivers out there in the world, thank you for being that sibling, because that's not what everybody gets, but that's awesome. And that is so true. I love that. And so if you are out there and you're somebody who has another family member doing it, and I want to piggyback on that and say 2 things. One is, if you are the caregiver asking for help when you're overwhelmed or whatever, you, again, going back to being specific. One of the things I did that I think really worked out for me is I had a pretty good relationship with my brother and my sister. We all get along. We don't live close to each other, so we don't see each other a lot. But I had a conversation with both of them one-on-one, and I just said, I need your support. And here's what support would look like for me. I need to know that I can call you. I need to know that you're going to listen to me when I need some advice, when I ask for it. But I also don't need you to call me and second guess everything I do. It won't be supportive for me if you're telling me I'm doing it wrong all the time when I'm the one here doing it. I need you to trust that I'm doing what our parents want. So if I can get that from you, I will feel support. So I was really clear about what support looked and felt like for me. I really appreciated it when my siblings would call and say, "What do you need from me right now?" Or if I called to say, "Oh, it's going crazy, they'd say, "What can I do right now?" Not, "Oh, you have to do this and you should do that." They didn't should all over me. They just said, "What can I do?" And then I could ask, or I could say, "I don't know. What are your ideas?" Because I don't know. I am out of. But it's so great that you offered that, because it is important. So it goes back to all of that. Yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I mean, he's not an entrepreneur, but I think
Yeah.
in this instance, as we're talking about just a certain age group, as we're taking care of older people or younger people, you have a support system around you and you need to embrace it. And if you see someone that you care about, whether it's a friend or a family member or a coworker that you're close with, and you see them struggling in life, just step in and see, because sometimes all they actually need is to know you're there, because that gives them a sense of relief. Like my brother still wanted to take on a lot of things. I interjected and said, "No, I'm coming out for 2 weeks. You're getting a break." But sometimes it's just that matter of people understanding they have someone. I know I'm extremely guilty of maybe not asking for the help that I need.
Yeah.
So when you extend it, people are more likely to say, "Yeah, I could really use that," or "Thank you so much for that offer."
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't always know what somebody else needs or wants until we ask what they need or want. But a lot of people do. I definitely had people reach out to me that gave me advice that I wasn't looking for, gave me advice and told me what I should be doing. You know, thankfully, not my relatives, but other people would say, "You should really be doing this." And one of their friends in their community where they lived called me and just gave me an earful about how I should be doing this with my mom. And my parents had specifically wanted to go into assisted living. They did not want to live with either me or my brother or my sister. They really wanted us to have our own lives. They had that all written out. I had a blueprint, thank goodness, from them. And they had long-term health care insurance that paid specifically for assisted living. So when this gentleman called me up and said, "No, you should just have your mom live with you. You should have a hospital bed in your living room. You should do all these things," I said, "That's not what my mom wanted." And he said, "Oh, no, I know that's what she needs. So you should." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you so much. I'm glad that you love my mom. I got this. Bye-bye." Wow. Click.
Unsolicited information is not always valuable information.
So true. And in the midst of this whole conversation about taking care of yourself and what do you need and how do you balance, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about are just some very simple things, but they're not simple. Sometimes the things that are not difficult, but they don't become apparent to us because we don't stop to think about them and we don't stop to take that time to be aware. And I think that's really hard when you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur. There's a lot of noise out there, isn't there? There's a lot of noise out there about what you should do and how do you do this, and you got to do this and all these things. And sometimes you have to listen to that and spin around a little bit, chew on it a little bit, and then you've got to get down to your gut and see, how does this sit with me? Is this going to work in who I am and what I need right now? And it's tough. And I appreciate what you are doing and talking to entrepreneurs and trying to help them find those skills, because it's hard out there to start your own stuff and get out there and doing all of it. A lot of fear shows up, a lot of lack of knowledge. And so you're trying to find places where you can build the skills you need and also work through those fears of, gosh, can I do this? Can I step outside my comfort zone sometimes? And all of this is part of keeping that balance together so that you can have a happy, healthy life that's family and business and personal. There's more than one person you're trying to be with and consider.
Yeah, for sure. I look back when my mother, and this is going back to 2000, my mother, I moved her over from Germany to America. Mm-hmm. She had cancer and I'm an only child and my kids were little at the time and I was working full time in business for myself. And I didn't really have a lot of people. All the people were in Germany. So I didn't have anybody in America. And I remember when she passed and I brought her ashes to Germany and came back, I got so sick. Mm-hmm. I got so sick for a whole month. It was like everything came down. So that's why I'm saying it really manifests itself in the body. And
Yeah.
again, I'm a doer. I was like the kids, the business, my husband who was traveling all the time, my mother, she was with us for a while too in hospice. She stayed with us till she went to hospice. Everything. I never forget how sick I literally couldn't get out of bed for an
Yeah.
entire month. And so it is important to recognize that, I think.
I think as entrepreneurs, we're just wired that way. We're already the doers of the world. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you're not going to probably be lazy if you want to be a good entrepreneur. So we're already pre-wired to do and to take on a lot. And so it makes a lot of sense that you just keep piling it on. So I think the conversation of really having those boundaries and understanding what that looks like and that it is possible to do all, be all, but it is possible to have it all and not feel like you have to do it all.
Yeah,
And ask for
yeah.
help. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very true. Yeah, and
So-
It's
and
been great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Christy. Great conversation.
you bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Great tips, especially for those mom entrepreneurs. So
The
Yeah.
mompreneurs. Now
The
what they're called.
mompreneurs. Yeah.
Thank you
yeah.
so much. And we'll be putting all your information in the show notes. If anybody wants to get a hold of Christy or read the book, we'll definitely have a place for you to connect with her. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Christy.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.